in Ireland, we actually, up until relatively recently, we have had settlement of more of a dispersed character. So I want to talk about something a little different than what you heard this morning, which is a natural routeway in Ireland called the Midland Corridor, and its appeal over the Long Durée for settlement. So it's a natural routeway in counties West Meath and Offaly in the Irish Midlands. Just there, here's a close-up of my study area. It runs in a northeast by southwest orientation for approximately 40 kilometres, and it's between 5 and 10 kilometres wide. And it intersects just here with the Schleemore, which is an early medieval roadway, which would have ran along the course of this Esker Ridge right here, which is a ridge of gravel and sand sediments from the glacial retreat that were left behind. And then it's flanked on the east and west by raised bog wetlands. So the dry soils which make up this Midland Corridor would have been the most suitable areas in this region for movement and settlement. Now, its subsoils are composed principally of limestone sands and gravels in the northern area, and limestone till, which you mostly get in the south. It's crossed by a number of esker ridges, as we saw. So the eskers and the limestone sands and gravels would have been especially well drained. The limestone till would have been slightly heavier, and then of course you have the alluvials either side of the rivers right here, the Tullamore and the Clogher rivers. Okay, so they would have slowed movement a bit. This is the type of raised bog landscape that you get in much of the Irish Midlands if you're not familiar with wetlands. So many of these would only have been accessible with the help of timber trackways, and you can see here the juxtaposition between these wetlands right here, and this is the Clara Ridge. So these dry soils that I'm discussing, really they're almost the only option for settlement and for movement. The routeway was identified by the historical geographer Alfred Smyth in a volume on the province of Leinster in early medieval Ireland. And it would have connected the medieval province of Meath via this routeway through Leinster and onwards to Munster in the southwest of Ireland. Now, for a prehistoric context, that means it would have connected the catchment area for the River Boyne, which is where we have our Boyne Valley passage tomb complex, would have been the location of significant settlement and funerary activity in the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, to the Tipperary region of North Munster, which was also intensively settled in prehistory. These are two areas of competing influence, and this Midland region would have acted as something of a boundary place between them, owing to the natural boundaries of the bogs and the esker ridges of this landscape. So the line of the esker ridge itself would have acted as a mythological division between La Chuin, that's Cun's half, and La Mugha, Mug's half. These are the two mythological halves of Ireland. And of course the bogs would have been natural boundaries by slowing movement. So this makes the existence of a routeway through this region quite significant because it's linking these two opposing influences from the northern and the southern portions of Ireland. So the settlement activity of this region takes on a particular character as a result of these competing influences. So Smyth looked at this as a medieval routeway, and I'll discuss that in a bit, but I wanted to look at it in the Long Durée and see just how long we've actually been using this routeway. So let's start with the Neolithic period. So the Neolithic sites in this Midland region seem to cluster around the northern extent of the Midland Corridor, particularly in the areas dominated by the limestone sand and gravel. So there are a few wetland sites just around Croghan Hill, which is the highest point here, but I won't discuss them. I'm more concerned today with the dryland sites. So they were discovered here in advance of the M6 motorway project. This motorway would have gone pretty much along here. Okay, so there could be a little bit of a bias in what we know about Neolithic sites in this region, but there was another motorway just here, the Tullamore bypass, where we didn't find any Neolithic evidence. Also, the pollen study showed negligible anthropogenic impact on the natural environment. So it seems that there was no significant settlement in this region at this time, beyond this distribution up here. But the distribution of artefacts shows that people were accessing this landscape and leaving behind a range of objects. So were they accessing the area but not building in it or inhabiting it? So let me just go back. there are two clusters basically. We have, this is the Midland Corridor right here, okay. Then you have the River Boyne, which separates it from a slightly different cluster. So I won't go through all of the sites just in the interest of time. But you see the first cluster east of the river within the Midland Corridor, they consist mostly of burnt mounds and burnt spreads, and they are generally located in this dry area, the limestone sands and gravels, but in locally wet conditions, so next to bogs, next to rivers. So they probably represent repeat visits to use Paleolithic technology, positioned in these dry areas but with the local wetness. They may occupy an area from which hunting parties were organised, using the neck of the Midland Corridor as a gateway to the wetlands of Offaly. Then the other side of the river, we see sites of a slightly different character. They tend to be, again, sites with evidence of burning, but instead of collecting the stones and spreads, we have a number of pit sites here. But again, they're in a dry area, but with locally wet conditions. So the sites east and west of the Brosna involved use of these localised wet areas. They both indicate episodes of burning and the use of Paleolithic technology. But while the cluster east of the Brosna was situated in limestone sand and gravel area, those to the west were located on heavier limestone till. The sites in the east involved the accumulation of stones in mounds and spread, with the western ones into pits. And the quantities of stones in the western sites also appear to have been quite modest, suggesting that they weren't visited as frequently as the Midland Corridor distribution. They also appear to be a little bit later, from the late Neolithic as opposed to the middle Neolithic ones of the Midland Corridor. So this suggests that the earliest Neolithic activity in the area was organised from the neck of the Midland Corridor. They were probably temporary seasonal campsites which were intended to facilitate hunting in the marginal wetlands. So this portion of the Midland Corridor appears to have been used as a launch pad to access these wetlands, possibly from the areas of Neolithic occupation to the north in Meath that I discussed earlier. Also, the deposition of axes in watery places, such as bogs and rivers, suggests that there was a ritual element to this landscape, so special trips would have been taken to deposit these items in liminal spaces. So moving on then to the Bronze Age, we start to see a little more activity here. So exactly in the same place, right here, we start to see clustering of barrows. So this suggests that we're starting to see an intensification of settlement activity in this region. And we can see this in the paleoenvironmental data and also the discovery of a number of habitation and wetland sites in this region. It's been suggested by another Irish archaeologist, Owen Grogan, that the valleys of the Brosna and the Clogher rivers, so this river and this river, would have been the focus for settlement in the Bronze Age in Ireland in the Midlands. Now, there's also a considerable amount of burnt mound sites discovered in the northern portion of Midland Corridor and along the M6 routeway here. You can spot it very easily there in this line of dots. So that's telling us more about the intensity of activity in this area. And then you have settlement sites at Knockdomney, Tubber and Ballinderry too, just up here, along the course of this Esker Ridge. So they're showing that the dry land around the Esker Ridges began to be favoured. They were offering light, well-drained soils and access to a natural routeway. But beyond the barrow and the burnt mound distribution along the Midland Corridor, there appears to be less early activity. Now, the subsoil there is of limestone till, so it's heavier than the limestone sands and gravels in the northern extent, so this would have been less attractive for early settlement. There appears to be something different happening in the southern extent of the Midland Corridor. Here we see a number of depositions of hoards. So we have the hoard of Frankfurt, Darris, River Boyne, Charleville, all along the course of the Midland Corridor here. But also we see that Darris, Frankfurt and Charleville are along the course of this Esker Ridge as well. And this Esker leads to the ford at Keelog, a very important ford on the River Shannon. It's our biggest river in Ireland. The site of major Bronze Age deposition. Then you have the contents of the Darris hoard, this one here. It contained a mixture of Class 1 and Class 2 horns. Class 1 are from the north of Ireland, Class 2 from the southwest. So that's showing that these two opposing influences from the north and the south were meeting in this region, which must have happened through the Midland Corridor. And we see this southern influence in the construction of 4 hill forts on the western side of the Slieve Bloom Mountains, just here, overlooking the Midland Corridor. This is the Midland Corridor. So they're strategically located to overlook this routeway, as we see with many Munster hill forts. And the North Munster project, where I got this map from, they've illustrated a number of major prehistoric routeways. Among it we have the Midland Corridor. So we're seeing other people are identifying this nominally medieval routeway was being used in prehistory, as well as the Slieve, another nominally early medieval roadway, was in use in prehistory as well. Grogan has suggested that a number of later prehistoric settlement complexes, which appeared just here, formed the northern extent of lowland Tipperary, it's around here, lowland Tipperary settlement. And the Bronze Age hoards that I've discussed would have formed a buffer zone between North Munster and the Midlands. So these hill forts then would have been overlooking the boundary area of Munster with southwestern influence. I suggest that until the late Bronze Age, the Midland Corridor was well established only as far as Charleville, just about here. And from there, the Tullamore Burr esker could have been taken to the ford at Keelog. Now, this section of the study area has not benefited from as much development-led discoveries as the northern half, where we have all this dense activity. But I suspect that if we're going to find Bronze Age habitation here, it would adhere to the course of the limestone sand and gravel esker ridge, just as we saw up here in the Mount Temple esker. Okay. So by the medieval period, it became that important routeway that Smyth described. It was the means by which the Uí Néill dynasty extended their influence southward from Meath into Leinster, as you see here. This is the routeway that they would have taken. And it became the region of the Ferchel people of the Uí Néill. So you can see them listed right here. Ferchel means the men of the churches. It was the location of several important early medieval ecclesiastical and settlements. Now, as I said, in Ireland we mostly have dispersed settlement. These are the exception, monastic settlements. So this is where we start to see the agglomerations proper. They're the closest things that we have in Ireland to towns or cities. And along the Midland Corridor we have major ecclesiastical settlements such as Rahue, Durrow, Raham, Linley, Kinnity and Rosscray. You'll notice these are ring forts. So this is more the type of settlement that we see in Ireland. They'd be farmsteads, single farmsteads. So it's more usual to get these in Ireland, but you'll notice there's not a lot of them along the Midland Corridor because they had more specialised, I suppose, settlement in the form of ecclesiastical complexes. Now, these sites are notable in this region in that while they were thought of as Meath monasteries, some of them actually have some very strong Munster influences, and actually many of their founders were from Munster, from the southwest of Ireland. So again, we're continuing to see those competing influences from Meath, from the northern region of Ireland, and also from Munster in the south. Today we can still see the traces of the Midland Corridor and the territory of the Ferchel in the boundaries of the Diocese of Meath, if you can see it just here. And then this is the existing roadway map today. So the N52 is the roadway that today occupies our old Midland Corridor. And the region that we looked at from the very beginning, just up here, where we had our Neolithic settlement and our Barrow cluster, that is the town of Kilbeggan. So we see continued settlement in exactly that region. The biggest town in the area is down here at Tullamore, where the Midland Corridor crosses some of these rivers. So that's demonstrating the type of continuity which these natural routeways so often exhibit, and the tendency for settlement to cluster in such landscapes. So my concluding remark would be that now most settlement in Ireland has been dispersed, small scale and rural, but the agglomerations that we do get in ecclesiastical sites and the existing towns today didn't come from nowhere, and this routeway would have played a major part in the use of this landscape for settlement. Thank you.